Here's my advice to the Mitch McConnell team. Get lawyers. I think this is a fraud that's being perpetrated upon the taxpayer. I think there's a high likelihood that what they're doing here is illegal. I don't think that Mitch McConnell is alive. I don't think he's sentient. So long as Mitch McConnell is in the hospital room protected by the Capitol Police, where the doctors and the nurses are governed by confidentiality provisions and HIPAA law, who's to know?
I'm Joanna Coles. This is the Daily Beast podcast. Where is Mitch McConnell? Have you seen him? Have you heard him speak? If you have, please let us know. Steve Schmidt of The Warning, who speaks in sort of biblical phraseology, is on the hunt for him, and he's going to be telling you about his Save America organization and what they're doing to find Mitch McConnell. Is he able to speak? Is he not? We just don't know. He's also livid about the hagiography of Lindsey Graham, who he says may well have sown the seeds for the Third World War. Super provocative. And it's a very lively conversation about the state of the Democratic Party too. And if you think the Democrats are going to walk it in November, listen to Steve, because he's not so sure. Before we get into it, just a reminder, please subscribe to the Daily Beast podcast. We've just put on 5,000 subscribers this week. Thank you so much. And also, we have a number for you to call and give us your comments. Tell us what you think. Ask us questions that any number of us can answer. David Rothkopf, Michael Wolff, Hugh Doherty, or myself. Okay, here's the number. 929-274-3577, 929-274-3577. And now let's get into it with Steve Schmidt. Steve Schmidt, I'm very glad we managed to talk to you this morning, because your movement, the Save America movement, is actually doing an activation in DC this afternoon with these, well, you're going to be handing out these incredible posters.
Gotta find them.
Can you explain to us? First of all, let's just look at this because it's so funny. He's a missing person. Let's look at this. 84 years old, 5'9", turtle-like.
It's generous. I was feeling generous.
You were feeling generous because then you've got, if you have any information about his whereabouts, please keep it to yourself. He would. Whose idea was this, and where are you going to be?
I don't know. We have a lot of, like in any organization, we have a lot of great young creative people that are really working hard and dedicated to the cause they're involved in. And so this is a really serious moment.
Mm-hmm.
I on the 0 to 1,000 conspiracy theory disposition scale, I would put my dad, who's 80 years old, he would rank as a 0.
Right.
He is a rock-ribbed Republican in the old school sense. He was the deputy majority leader of the New Hampshire legislature. We're driving down a country road. I said, Dad, all bullshit aside, do you think there's any chance that Mitch McConnell had a 20-minute conversation with any of these guys about Senate history? And he was driving. He looked at me. He goes, of course not. And the issue around McConnell here is the incandescence of the corruption, if you think about it. And I think the issue is not, if you ask, is Mitch McConnell dead? And obviously, for both of us, the response to it is, well, I don't know. Now, I think that's the wrong answer, though. I think the more precise answer is, who's to know? How can you know? We live in an era that's so rotten and where the lie has so strangled the truth that whether a man who served in the United States Senate since 1985 and wrecked it, by the way, more than any other, the world's greatest deliberative body, turned it into a farce and a joke around the world, whether he's alive or not, after all the damage he did, this is like the penultimate episode of a writer's fantasy ending for Veep. And so who's to know? That's how rotten our country has become. It's impossible to know.
It's impossible to know. And Steve, I mean, you were, famously a press advisor for John McCain. What would you be advising Mitch McConnell's team to do? I mean, why haven't they just issued a 10-second video of the senator saying, hey, guys, thanks for all your good wishes. I'm working hard at rehab. I'll be back soon.
Let me say more broadly. I was involved in McCain's campaign and worked in the White House and for Bush and another presidential campaign. But I think more relevant is that for much of my career, I advised companies and CEOs and people that were involved in big time crises. The type of crises when there's a nuclear reactor meltdown.
Well, hopefully you didn't deal with too many of those.
And billions of dollars at stake. And I was involved in things from Tom Brady and Deflategate to the Fukushima nuclear meltdown to emissions scandals with giant auto companies and on and on and on. Here's my advice to the Mitch McConnell team. Get lawyers.
Get lawyers? What do you mean, get lawyers?
I think this is a fraud that's being perpetrated upon the taxpayer in whatever statute is applicable. I think there's a high likelihood that what they're doing here is illegal. I don't think that Mitch McConnell is alive.
You literally don't think he's alive?
I don't think he's sentient. I don't think that picture's real. I don't think Mitch McConnell's walking out of the hospital. Again, maybe he cartwheels out tomorrow, and I gotta come back and say I didn't know he was such an accomplished gymnast. But the reality of this, I had my great good friend Dean Blundell and I do 2 of these a week. Podcasts a week, and Dean was saying, well, why can't Bashir just walk in there and find out? And I said, well, Andy Bashir can't show up at the hospital and declare, it's I, Andy Bashir, governor of the Commonwealth, let me into the room, right? And by the way, Andy Bashir's not in that political party that wants to be in your hospital room with you at the moment of birth, at the moment of death, that's peering through the bedroom window, right? Andy Bashir's in the party that believes in personal liberty and privacy. So long as Mitch McConnell is in the hospital room protected by the Capitol Police, who don't necessarily know what's going on in the hospital room, where the doctors and the nurses are governed by confidentiality provisions and HIPAA law, who's to know?
Imagine asking the airline that lost your luggage to keep an eye on your passport. That's not a backup plan. It's setting yourself up for failure. There's a reason you wouldn't trust the wrong person with something valuable, just like there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting for the people for over 35 years. With over $30 billion recovered for their clients, Morgan & Morgan knows a thing or two about fighting to get you the compensation you deserve. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is like hiring an army to go into battle. They've got more than 1,000 lawyers and 100 offices nationwide, and if you're injured by someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. Not all law firms are the same. Hire the wrong one, and you may be beat before you even start. If you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan will fight to get their clients the best results, and their fee is free, unless they win. For more information, you can go to forthepeople.com/dailybeast. You don't think it's possible, Steve, that he's just had a stroke and he can't speak, which would still render him incapacitated in terms of being a senator? Because are his staff actually lying when they say that he's actually working on the affairs of state and he's very busy?
Listen, the whole pretense of that is that what we know, we don't know a lot, right? We do know that there was an ambulance call, that there's a MedTech EMT in the ambulance, that they're performing CPR on an 84-year-old man,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's real. Now, that 84-year-old man, statistically, you had CPR performed on him and got put in an ambulance, has a 6% chance of ever walking out of the hospital. Was that person engaged in a 20-minute conversation with CNN's Scott Jennings about Senate history? He was not. And that will unravel. And when you consider the corruption of the corporate media, and you look at the disgrace of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, to me, it's a very serious question. When that completely unravels, is CNN going to toss Scott Jennings overboard? And the answer to that question is no. Scott Jennings did not have a 20-minute conversation with him. It's preposterous.
Well, who did he have a conversation with then?
Didn't have a conversation with anyone.
So you think Scott Jennings is just completely making it up? I mean, we called CNN, and CNN said that this was Scott Jennings's experience, and they hadn't fact-checked it. They distanced themselves from Scott on this.
They could ask Scott Jennings to provide his phone. They could ask Scott Jennings to show the phone number he was connected to. There's a number of different things that Scott Jennings could be asked to narrow in, but no, with the available facts and the fact that Scott Jennings has zero credibility, it doesn't reset every morning. In The Apprentice, I appreciate that Meatloaf and Little John could be mortal enemies in one episode, and then they'd be best friends in the next one without any explanation in between.
Mm-hmm.
But in real life, that's not how it works. So the people that have immolated their credibility have immolated their credibility. It's a giant smoking pit in a crater. So no, when Scott Jennings says, I talked to Mitch McConnell for 20 minutes, I don't believe him. I think anybody who does is a fool. That being said, the issue here is that who's to know? How can you know?
Just explain to us, and I know that you're talking to Governor Beshear later today, but just explain to us the political advantage of pretending, if that's what McConnell's team is doing, that the senator it's business as usual. It's just taking place in a hospital room. Just remind us of the complexity around Kentucky law here, and sort of how do we think that this is going to resolve if the senator, as you pointed out, very low chance of someone who's 84 having CPR in an ambulance, actually, unfortunately, walking back out of the hospital?
Right. So first off on this, Andy Beshear, two-term governor of Kentucky, Republican state, Democratic governor, almost certainly a presidential candidate in 2028. And he's one of the people that I think that has an excellent chance of getting some lift, a very appealing Democratic candidate, type of person who could win a presidential race. So he's dealing with this. And there's a lot of magical thinking on social media that, in fact, that Andy Beshear is more like Merlin the magician than he is the governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And he has some power to define the life force of Mitch McConnell through the wall, or some extra constitutional ability to rappel through the window, get a listening device into the room. And he can't do any of those things. And what he's saying, and I think what he's doing is appropriate, and I think he distilled it to its essence. Speaker resign. What is the condition of the senator? And I think he's put a proposition on the table. Now,
speak or resign.
Speaker resign. Now, there is a deadline that is approaching, and I don't want to muddle for your viewers what that deadline is by being inaccurate around it. But in essence, the state of Kentucky has taken through legislative action, they passed a law, a statute, right? A statutory law that took from the governor his ability to appoint the Republican senator's successor. So you have 2 Republican senators in the state. You have a Republican legislator with a Democratic governor, and the Kentucky Constitution says the governor appoints the senator if the senator dies. What the Kentucky legislature did is pass a law that says in Kentucky, this law is a higher card than the Constitution, which it's not. If there is a constitutional question, in this case, the power of the governor, then it must be addressed as a constitutional matter, not as a statutory matter. So when the legislature did this, this was a theoretical proposition because there were no dead senators in Kentucky for the Democratic governor to replace. Or, in this case, because who's to know, try to figure out if they're alive so that they can make the decisions to replace the Kentucky senator so the people of the state of the people of the Commonwealth can have a U.S. senator representing them in Washington, D.C. So again, impossible to know if he's alive or dead, right? So long as the fiction is maintained that it's all good to go, and he's doing fine and hard at work, it's impossible to test this constitutional question.
Right.
Now, at the second, it becomes clear, right, that Mitch McConnell's either out or whatever else, you now have a court case about the power of the governor and the power of the legislature that'll be decided by the Supreme Court of Kentucky. And the way that I look at it, if the decision is straight ahead, it follows the rule of law, it's not a very tough case to understand that the governor's ability to appoint a replacement to the dead senator is enshrined in the Kentucky Constitution and cannot be undone by a law passed by the Kentucky legislature.
So shouldn't Governor Beshear have raised this earlier? I mean, we're fast approaching the deadline. It's August the 3rd, I believe. We've had a ticker on the Daily Beast counting the number of days that it's been since anybody's seen Mitch McConnell say anything. Why is he leaving it this late?
I don't think the criticism of his timeliness of action is fair, in the sense of I try to place myself in the room, and there is a room in Kentucky where the governor's meeting with his team.
Mm-hmm.
What's he supposed to do here? The burden is not on the governor. The burden is on the Mitch McConnell team, right? Is it possible, right? And this is the real question, that stewed in a culture of amorality, that you have an entire office of young people who've been rendered so cynical that there's not one of them that understands what the right thing to do here is? And I think that's entirely possible. And I think that's what the issue is. And I think what the governor is saying is that he needs information.
Mm-hmm.
And the office is refusing to give information the conduct of the senator's wife is beyond bizarro.
You mean because she was in China and didn't come back after
course.
she heard her husband had been taken unconscious
Yeah,
and
of
having
course.
CPR, and she stayed in China?
Yeah.
And Steve, why isn't the president making more fuss about this? I mean, we know there's no love lost between him and McConnell. Couldn't he have intervened here and has chosen not to?
The silence indicates to me that they know what's going on. And if you knew what was going on, what would you do? You would not talk about it. And I truly believe that Trump, at his core, is sloppy and undisciplined, but he does think like a criminal, intuitively. In the way that a criminal would think,
Yeah.
right, is that, oh, fuck, don't talk about it again. If we don't talk about it, he's doing fine. We don't want to get mixed up in this, right? So this is, and there's a reason there's a saying like the elephant in the room, right? And all of these old sayings like about the cover up being worse than the crime. And just to note, it did not look like the ambulance that went to perform CPR on the 84-year-old guy, whose wife thought there was nothing to worry about regarding her trip in China. And really, no one knows why she's there as a former cabinet secretary, but put that aside. The ambulance didn't look like it was in a big hurry to get to the hospital.
What do you mean the ambulance didn't look like it was in a big hurry?
I think it's fair to say the crew had a lethargic disposition in the driveway. They were not racing to get the patient who had CPR performed on him to the hospital in the manner that I would hope that if we were out somewhere together having lunch and one of us went down, they would get us to the hospital. What I'm saying, I can only think of one reason why the ambulance was so slow, just judging by the video of the contemporaneous events outside the house.
So you, Steve Schmidt, believe firmly that Mitch McConnell has already passed into that chamber in the sky?
I don't know what the line is upon which legally one would say you're gone. For example, I do know this. The modern Republican fascist party was born out of the Terri Shiavo decision,
Right.
which collapsed the Republican coalition in a really fundamental way.
And Terri Shiavo was the young mother who was on life support. And it became it's a huge driver of J.D. Vance's new book.
Right. And this was Jeb Bush's most shameful moment. His brother, a big government conservative, coming home from Texas on Air Force One to intervene in a state court decision about the end of a young woman's life who was brain dead, right? To sign an act of Congress that intervened, and this was the limited government party, right? This was an epic moment in American politics and the collapse of one coalition and the rise of another. Because this was a moment of profound disequilibrium where the religious crackpots in the party finally jumped the electric fence like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park.
Oh my goodness, you have such a cinematic way of speaking. But just to remind people, her husband wanted to let nature take its course
Right.
and to switch off the machine. And the government came in over the top of the state's decision to allow him to do that, to essentially unplug the machine that was keeping her alive and insisted on keeping her alive.
And it was his decision to make.
But her parents wanted her kept alive.
It wasn't their decision to make under Florida law. And what Jeb Bush did was reprehensible. And again, the jamming of your faith down my throat is antithetical to every conceivable precept of small c conservatism, which is built on a foundation of leave me the fuck alone, right? And right, you do your thing, and I'll do my thing, and I won't judge your thing, and you don't judge my thing. And so in a system where you're supposed to believe in federalism and you're supposed to believe in the power of the state and have respect for the sovereignty of the state and the state court decision, because after all, you're a small c conservative Republican, Jeb Bush, right? That terrible decision obliterated the Republican coalition, because for the moderate, for the limited government conservative, right, what you understood was this was a big government looking in the window Republican Party. And there is some irony that Mitch McConnell is in this state stripped of his dignity. But I don't know if he has brain activity. I don't believe he can speak. I think that's all a lie. And I don't think he's walking out of the hospital. And I think it's completely unacceptable that there's no statement. I think the governor's completely right to demand one. I think mostly outside the Daily Beast, the press coverage of this is appalling and anemic. And it's not funny. It's not a joke. And when I say who's to know, it's a really tragic indictment of the reality that trust has so thoroughly collapsed that here at the end of Mitch McConnell's life, who's to know if he's dead or alive? And this is reality in Trump's America, and it's sick.
Right. And if you think about how much AI the president himself uses on Truth Social, his own platform, it's impossible not to now apply the kind of question, is this AI? What is actually going on here? We can no longer trust a photograph that we see, even when it's issued from an American senator's office. What did you think of the Lindsey Graham funeral yesterday? I know you must have come across Lindsey Graham many times.
Oh, yeah.
What did you think of the president? First of all, he was struggling to stay awake. We've got some clips actually of him here.
See, now he saw what was happening to you and your family as a grave injustice, and the world.
Clearly the president struggling to stay awake at, in theory, one of his close friends' funeral. The weird sort of patting of the coffin as he came back from his eulogy, the stopping in the middle of his eulogy as if to say, who wrote this rubbish? He wasn't liked by everybody. He was a tough cookie. He was a tough cookie. Was that sort of peak Trump? What did you think of that?
Do you watch Palm Royale?
I don't watch Palm Royale.
So I love Palm Royale. And I accidentally got into it because my wife is watching it and she's watching it on the computer, and I just kind of drifted into it. The show's incredible. So anyway, so I'm watching the Lindsey Graham funeral. All I can think about is the funeral scene where there's the main character, Maxine, is in a coffin. Allison Janney is leading the mourners, and Maxine is alive in the casket. There's a whole plot going on, but Allison Janney is leading the crowd in a rendition of Chattanooga Choo Choo. And that was all I could think about as I was watching the Lindsey Graham funeral, the shallowness of it, the artifice of it, a perfect tribute to a shallow and empty and hollow man. And my primary thought was the Chattanooga Choo Choo song with Allison Janney, but my secondary thought was how many young men and women are going to be alive because this guy's out of business. And
you mean because there won't be as many hawks around Trump?
And I want to say something. I wrote this week, and in case I get run over by a bus later today, right? I just want to put myself on the record.
Well, hopefully, if you do, the ambulance will take you very quickly to the hospital.
I hope. Listen, it apparently there's a British filmmaker who's been with Lindsey Graham for the last couple of years with total access, filming every phone call. And so Netanyahu has no idea that he was a star in Lindsey Graham's documentary.
This is Alex Holder's film.
And literally for the first time in the history of human civilization, right? You're going to get to see the development of a war from one man's seed kernel through its embryonic stage, its zygote stage, and you're going to see something that's going to have a seismic impact on American politics. I'm not sure that the filmmaker appreciates the impact that this is going to have in 2028. There was a book, I always get the Lewises mixed up, Sinclair Lewis or Upton Sinclair, I guess Sinclair Lewis, The Jungle, that's about 100 years old, that shocked the nation about its meat industry, the meat packing industry.
Right.
And this is going to shock the conscience. So Caitlin Collins has the filmmaker on last night, and she plays two clips. And the first clip is with Netanyahu, and it's shocking to watch, as is the cheerleading scene with Lindsey Graham. And what you realize about Lindsey Graham, and no one has said this out loud, I wrote this today. George Washington, when he left, gave basically two warnings. One was about foreign entanglements and dual loyalties, and the other, of course, was about the perils of partisanship against patriotism. Lindsey Graham was functioning as a lobbyist in the Senate for the head of the Israeli government. Lindsey Graham was functionally a foreign agent. He was faithless to the U.S. Constitution. And the reason he was out of a deep neediness to be needed, to be seen, to be relevant. This was his life. This was his game. This was the plot. And so the filmmaker says, well, at the end, all of this outpouring from prime ministers and here about Lindsey shows, whatever you might say about him, the impact that he had on the broader world that we live in. And he framed it through a prism of, well, these people respected Lindsey. These people did not respect Lindsey Graham. And the filmmaker doesn't understand this. Doesn't understand what he's looking at in his own film, right? From the clip. Those people viewed Lindsey Graham as a mark. He's the most easily manipulated senator in United States history. He was unread, unprepared, serially sloppy, and a vandal in the world.
Steve, what about his insistence that America give aid to Ukraine. I mean, he died the day after he came back from his 10th visit to Ukraine. And Ukraine didn't invite the Russians in. The Russians invaded Ukraine. Wasn't he on the side of right there?
He was on the side of the man who has shattered the American military, its ethos and its honor. He is on the side of the man who abandoned Ukraine and humiliated Zelensky in the Oval Office, the greatest man of our age. He is on the side of a fascist cause that has started a war that has replenished Vladimir Putin's treasury with petrodollars. The world is a complex place. This is a book written by William Shirer, who was an eyewitness and a famous CBS News correspondent to the rise and the fall of the Third Reich. What emerged in the aftermath of that were the collective security agreements envisioned by a giant named Roosevelt that Lindsey Graham dared to compare to Donald Trump while comparing Netanyahu to Churchill. And they imagined a world that is being undone by Donald Trump. What Lindsey Graham was a Flat Stanley, a Waldo, a peripatetic traveler who needed to be seen, who needed to go to Ukraine, that needed to be in the game. And the Ukrainians manipulated him to the best of their ability, to the best of their advantage, for the cause of doing the right thing. But you can't be the fuel supplier, the match supplier, the driver, the golfing buddy of the arsonist, and say, but I'm a volunteer fireman when I'm not with him. Doesn't work.
So, Steve, how does Trump get out of the war with Iran then?
We've lost this war with Iran, and I think it's very important to understand in Task and Purpose, for example, and the great military writers of this era, Tom Ricks, longtime Washington Post correspondent, Pulitzer Prize winning author, makes the point that here's what Donald Trump fundamentally doesn't understand. He doesn't understand the difference between pain and cost. He thinks that by causing pain, I'll blow up your bridge, that's an offset to the type of cost that Iran can impose. And Iran can impose tremendous cost because they control the Strait of Hormuz. And we talk about all of these things every day in our politics. But, you know, if we were just to slow down and to take a deep breath and focus on one story, one thing, right, that happened in the last 7 days that really, really, really matters, it's that Ukraine hit an Iranian ship with a drone in the Caspian Sea. And in the instant that happened, two theaters of two different wars combined into one. There is a war raging that has these countries involved in it as combatants. The United States, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, North Korea, and there are more. All of these nations right now are involved in these wars, fighting. We don't talk about it. The European sensibility is, and there'll be a big anniversary celebration, remembrance on the 1st of September in Poland, which marks the beginning of the Second World War. But did the Second World War really begin on September 1st, 1939? Or did it begin at the Anschluss? Or did it begin in Czechoslovakia? Or did it begin in Ethiopia? Or did it begin in Manchuria? Whenever it began, there's a body of evidence to suggest that it started many years before the official date. And when we look at what's going on, what Lindsey Graham did, right? You look at 100 years ago, 100 years ago, right now, right? That were the kids being born who were the youngest guys who landed on the D-Day beaches. That's what was being set in motion. That was the foundation that was being laid.
So are you saying that Lindsey Graham laid the foundation for World War III?
Absolutely. That's his legacy.
How does Donald Trump get out of this mess? I mean, it's clearly costing him at the pump. We know this war isn't popular. We know he campaigned against no forever wars. He started something which he thought, like Venezuela, was going to be over quickly. He can't seem to understand that just bombing the hell out of somewhere doesn't mean that they're going to surrender. And now he's got himself in a terrible mess because the Iranians, as you say, control the Strait of Hormuz, which was not something they'd ever done before. In fact, it was something they weren't quite sure they would be able to do. And now it turns out that they can. He's got the midterms hurtling towards him. How does he get out of this mess?
He doesn't.
Is this the end? Does this war bring about the end of Donald Trump? Is this his downfall?
It's the beginning of his defenestration, but I think this is so important for everybody to understand. 11 years in, the far crazy left is as hostile to democracy as the far crazy right in this country. And Donald Trump has destabilized in the most profound ways our political system. And he's going to be defeated in this election, but MAGA, those smaller, will come back in this next Congress 33% crazier. As bad as they are, as capitulant and appeasing as they are, the fanatics who are coming will make clear the physics of a collapsing political movement, which is like a white star collapsing. As that star collapses into a black hole from a giant, it gets smaller, it gets hotter, it gets denser, it gets smaller, it gets hotter, it gets denser, until it finally implodes. And so the defeat will not be a moderating event. The defeat will not be a tempering event. The defeat will be an inciting event. The defeat will be a fueling event for more vociferous extremism as a primary process gets underway in a political party, both political parties, right, that are badly broken. The Republican Party deeply at a moral level, at a patriotism level, at a constitutional level, and the Democratic Party just at a basic functioning and competency level.
Do you think the Democrats are going to win both the House and the Senate?
I think it is possible. Well, Democrats will win the House.
It's only 3 votes.
Their idiocy is throwing away the chance to win the Senate. And I'll give you a perfect example. In the state of Montana, you have 3 candidates in the race. You have a Republican named Kurt Almey. You have a Democrat named Alani Bankhead, and you have an independent named Seth Bodnar. So Alani Bankhead, she's a life coach, and a veteran, right? But she's, you can plainly look at her military record, right? Just the statement she makes. I don't find it credible. When somebody says, I fought terrorism on all 7 continents, you know that person is exaggerating something. That's not true.
Right, especially terrorism in Antarctica.
So, like, I have a keen eye for that. You have a keen eye for that, right? For the puffery. She's a person who's promising 11,000% returns, okay? So you have polling that's out there in the 3-way race.
And she's the Democrat, right?
She's the Democrat. She's the Democrat. So she's a life coach. She's also a financial advisor who's promising 11,000% returns to people. Okay. Let me tell you about the independent candidate. Independent candidate graduated first in his class at West Point. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He was a Green Beret. He was a GE executive. And he was the president of the University of Montana. He's a young father. His wife's a pediatrician. And in a 2-way race, he's in the even race. What is the Democratic Party going to do about their nominee in a state where, because of the debacle in Maine and other places, there's a pickup opportunity when the consequence is that Mike Lee is going to be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee unless the Democrats take control of the Senate.
Mike Lee, of course, the senator from Utah, Republican senator from Utah.
There are 2 black Democrats running in Mississippi and Louisiana. Scott Collum is a prosecutor. Jamie Davis is a farmer in Louisiana. And when Medgar Evers was assassinated, John Kennedy insisted he be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And Pete Hegseth removed the ability to find the gravesite, but Medgar Evers' grave, he insisted, unlike most of the graves there, that the word Mississippi be spelled out fully. Such was his pride in his state, the state that killed him in many ways. Right? Believed in the place that hated him so much. That's what optimism in America is. That's what patriotism is. Fannie Lou Hamer, who put the civil rights plank in a Democratic platform, right? Challenge the segregationists in the Democratic Party. Why isn't a national party in a cycle where $6 billion is going to be spent by them? Why are they saying there's not enough money to support these black candidates in South Carolina and Mississippi? Some people say, right, that we have to move on. We can't talk about what happened in 2024. My problem with that has always been my fear of what was going to happen. And we're starting off 2028 in precisely the same way that we started off 2024, which is basically an announcement from Jamie Harrison that there's too many white people in New Hampshire for them to maintain their first-in-the-nation status. And I could explain to Jamie Harrison and all the politicians from South Carolina why there aren't black people in New Hampshire. Right? Because there wasn't slavery and there wasn't industry for the Great Migration when they were fleeing the apartheid South. And here's an important thing for Democrats to understand, right? Democrats are supposed to be the rule of law party. I think I read that somewhere, right? In the era of Todd Blanche. New Hampshire is the only state in the country that has a state law that says we go first. And the reason they have that state law is because they did go first. About 106 years ago in 1920, in the progressive era, a progressive era reform was that New Hampshire decided to give people an ability to vote for a presidential primary contestant as opposed to being done in the back room. And so what's the right of the Rules Committee of the DNC to take something from a state on the basis they're claiming to take it from against their state law while saying we're the rule of law party? Such arrogance and stupidity. So here we go again, right? Starting off 2028 exactly like we did 2024, because the great political achievement of the age, right, is the most prolific liar since Goebbels and Hitler, Trump, right? In 2 elections out of 3. He was viewed as the more honest candidate. by the American people against the Democratic nominees, which is quite a thing to be able to pull off if you think about it.
Quite a thing to be able to pull off. Well, Steve Schmidt, it's always a thrill to talk to you because you come at things from a completely different perspective than anybody else. Are you thinking the independent candidate in Montana will win?
He can win if the Democrat gets out of the race, and he's the stronger candidate, with the consequences being the whack jobs that are going to be chairman of Senate committees, the corruption of the judiciary. Trump gets no more judicial nominees if we win these seats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have to win these seats. And the greatest impediment to winning these seats is not the strength of MAGA, it's the complete incompetence of the Chuck Schumer political operation, of the DSCC, of the DNC and Ken Martin. And we have to talk about it because they're the principal officers in a country of 330 million people that control billions of dollars of expenditure, and they're the bad news bears. They're failures, they're losers, and they're killing the country.
Well, that's very sobering. That's very sobering for any Democrat listening, and certainly for anybody, a functionary of the party. It's a bit of a wake-up call, Steve. We expect nothing less from the host of The Warning, your excellent YouTube and Substack. Steve Schmidt, thank you so much for joining us. And good luck with finding Mitch McConnell with your missing person poster. We've got to find Mitch McConnell.
We've got to find him.
And we will look forward to, if you find him, can you please tell us? We want
to
be your first call.
I will call you immediately.
Yep, I want to be your first call if you find him. And we will look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Now, I will say, just to close, right, again, a little generous on the poster. I think he looks like 5'6", but we put him 5'9" there. So I don't want anyone
you put him at 5'9".
to be disoriented.
Well, right. He's got his lobster chic red gingham shirt on.
Right,
I don't know if he was wearing that when he was last seen. I guess last seen in his blue shirt. Well, as I say, if you find him, let us know.
Absolutely. See you, Joanna.
Okay, so I don't know what my favorite part of that conversation was. Was it him honing in on the damage he thinks Lindsey Graham did? Is it his deep suspicion of an American senator's office and his refusal to believe that Mitch McConnell is still with us? Write and tell us what you think. Call our number, 929-274-3577. That's 929-274-3577. Leave us a comment and let us know, are you a conspiracy theorist on Mitch McConnell? Do you believe that he will be back in the Senate shortly? And do you believe he's doing the work of the Senate, despite the fact we have no evidence now for over 45 days that the senator can actually speak? Big thanks if you've joined us. Thank you so much. And big thanks to our production team. Ryan Murray, John Romero, Rachel Passer, Heather Passaro, and Neil Rosenhaus. I'll be back tomorrow with Michael Wolff. Well, we'll be going inside Trump's head. So the good news is we have so many B-Beast tier members now. There are too many names to read out, and we really appreciate your support.